As Chinese President Xi Jinping begins his state visit to Russia, we'll be looking at the strengthening of personal relationship between the two presidents and how this is likely to affect the international order. And I've been talking with the chairman of Hong Kong's Trade Development Council about the kind of role he could play in helping SMEs in Hong Kong to grow and prosper. Welcome to The Point. Live from Beijing, I'm Liu Xin. First of all, in a phone call Monday between President Xi Jinping of China and President Donald Trump of the United States, President Xi said that China-US relationship had seen fruitful results since his meeting with Trump at the Mar-a-Lago resort in April. However, he pointed out that bilateral ties had been influenced by what he called negative factors. It was only last Thursday that the US State Department approved a $1.4 billion arms sale to Taiwan, the first such deal since Trump took office. China has expressed strong opposition to the deal and urged the U.S. to stop any further weapons sales to Taiwan. Trump, for his part, reaffirmed in the call that the U.S. government had not changed its stance on the One China policy. Well, fine words indeed, but as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Making such statements is all very well as far as it goes, but it is only when real act that the entire process becomes meaningful. But the very fact that the two leaders can and do pick up the phone to one another to discuss issues of common concern is definitely a good thing. Separately, Chinese President Xi Jinping has started his state visit to Russia. Due to the strengthening personal relationship between Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, the breadth and depth of communication and coordination between the two countries have also been enhanced. What are the implications of the positive bilateral relations? What does Sino-Russian partnership mean to the world? We'll have a three-day series of discussions on this subject, and today we focus on the diplomatic aspect of this partnership. First, here is my point. Now, China and Russia share many common interests and have similar opinions on many international issues, such as security on the Korean Peninsula, Syria, and anti-terrorism. And the fact that the two are coming ever closer is not welcome news for Western countries. For them, Russia and China are inconvenient obstacles preventing them from having their way in international affairs. One example is the kind of division and fiery exchanges we've seen in the UN Security Council meetings concerning the latest chemical weapons attack in Syria. The US, France, and the UK wanted to take collective action against the Syrian government before the true perpetrators could be pinpointed. Russia and China believe it was necessary to launch a balanced investigation first. Out of frustration, a Western diplomat even blamed previous veto votes by Russia and China for allowing more chemical weapons use to happen, ignoring the fact that caches of chemical weapons are also in the hands of the opposition forces, many of whom are supported by Western countries. It is against such a backdrop of suspicion and anxiety that China and Russia's closer ties are being observed in the Western media. But China and Russia are determined to build closer relations, not the least because they are neighbors. Joining me today to discuss the topic are former Kremlin advisor Alexander Nekrasov and a senior fellow with the China Institute of International Studies, Mr. Yang Xiyu. Welcome, gentlemen, to the show. Mr. Nekrasov, first of all, this is Chinese President Xi Jinping's sixth visit to Russia since he took office in 2013, and it's already the third time they meet since the beginning of this year. What can we tell from such frequent levels of high-level bilateral visits?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important when leaders of such two great nations meet personally, because it's one thing talking over the phone, which is good as well, but it's a completely different thing when two leaders sit together and discuss matters of international importance. And I must say that the importance of this visit by the Chinese president is especially high because of the G20 summit which is coming on. And I have a feeling that the Western nations are feeling nervous, you know, when the two leaders are meeting days before the G20 summit. And I suspect they want to know what they're talking about there. It's quite important also to remember that during these high-level summits, there are also a lot of conversations and meetings going on behind the scenes between top officials. That is also very important. And I think that both presidents have made it clear that this is another step in the strengthening of friendship and cooperation with countries. And I suspect that we will see a lot of positive things coming out of this visit.
Mr. Yang Xi, what are the issues that will be topping the agenda of President Xi and President Putin while they meet?
First of all, I'd like to echo my Russian friends about the timing. The timing of the summit is very important. That means something important. Say before the series of bilateral summits between Xi Jinping and other leaders in the G20 platform, Xi go first to President Putin to discuss all important issues concerned by two sides. So that means something important. And among the top issues, I think bilateral cooperation and coordination are always at the first position between the two presidents. So because of this summit, the bilateral coordination and cooperation will be strengthened further. And on the international issues, I think ranging from the several points will be discussed by the two presidents. Number one, cooperation on the Korean Peninsula. That seems to be the United States as a very urgent issue, but also urgent to US, China and Russia. So China and Russia will launch a new cooperations on this issue for our shared goal on the denuclearization on the peninsula. And also, we will have a common interest and concerns in the turmoils and the conflicts in Syria as well as in the Middle East. So I think all the hot issues concerned by Russia and China and also concerned by the Western countries will be discussed first by the two presidents. That's very important.
Mr. Nekrasov, how important do you think it is for the two countries and especially the two presidents to further exchange and consolidate their shared position on such issues as the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue?
It's very important simply because the West and America do not really have a coherent strategy to deal with the crisis on the Korean Peninsula, the situation in Syria, and what I personally think is a very important problem, the battle with terrorism. Because I think both presidents in Moscow will discuss this issue in greater detail. And I think, to be honest with you, the reason why this meeting is also important, not because of the G20 summit, I mean it is important as well because of the timing, because we don't really see the policy of the Trump administration shaping up into something that we can understand. You know, we were expecting that he would, you know, develop his policy in the Middle East, that he would somehow be flexible and diplomatic on the North Korea issue. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I think the ball, you know, sort of drifted into the Russia-Chinese court. They are now the players on the world stage who will probably have to resolve this situation. First of all, of course, surrounding North Korea, because what the Americans are doing, and you know they have just recently introduced sanctions against a Chinese bank and some other companies, which is quite outrageous in itself for dealing with North Korea. I think it is absolutely paramount that the two leaders work out on some initiative they can put on the table and say to the Americans, look, this is what we need to do. Stop, you know, inflating tensions around North Korea. Let's do it properly. And in Syria as well, because the Americans are not showing really any flexibility and proper diplomacy.
And the opportunity,
so I think that is another issue.
Yeah, and the opportunity is really rare because President Xi and President Trump will also be meeting each other on the sidelines of the G20. So they will have the opportunity really to look look into the eyes of each other and you really talk. But Mr. Yang, now there are Western experts quoted by Western media saying, despite the positive trends, the bilateral relationship between China and Russia still lacks a solid foundation of mutual trust and a common identity. Only a strong common threat from the West could push China and Russia to move closer economic and militarily. What is your take on that?
Well, I partially agree with the analysis by the Western media, say both China and Russia are facing the similar pressures and the threats from the Western countries, especially from the United States. However, I disagree with the other part, say China and Russia do share a very solid base for the cooperation and the coordination. The partnership between China and Russia is very unique in the world. There have been so many partners, U.S. with so many countries, but none of the partners are equal footing. Only China and Russia, based on the equal footing, set up a new type of the partnership. So such a partnership address the common and the shared interests. So that is the solid base, not only because the common threats from the Western, but also we have a shared interest in the peace and stability on the peninsula, for example, on the peaceful solution to the Middle East and Syria, a political solution to the Syria conflicts. So many hard issues, we share the same view, same goal. That is the solid base for our cooperation.
Well, Mr. Nekrasov, China and Russia are also pushing for the change in the international order towards a more fair, more equitable, and giving more say to developing countries. How do you think the kind of world order that China and Russia are pushing for may affect the people in the rest of the world? What kind of world order are we looking at?
Well, obviously China and Russia present a different view on the world order because the West has always, in the last 20 years, has always thought that it is running the world. It is the one that dictates terms to all the other countries. And suddenly they see a danger to this sort of arrangement, which, by the way, is not accepted by many countries in the world who want to see it, a different setup. So I think that the reason I want to return to the point why the Western media is writing about sort of a conflicts between Russia and China. We see conflicts between America and its Western allies every day practically. If you look at the coverage of the last NATO summit with Trump coming to Europe and meeting other leaders there, you would see that there is no unity. There is no common understanding of how to resolve issues like we've been discussing, you know, the Korean Peninsula, the Middle East generally, terrorism. By the way, nobody talks about this, but the Western community doesn't even have a strategy to fight terrorism, which is quite remarkable considering that they have problems on their own soil linked to international terrorism. And China and Russia are actually two voices which bring reason into this whole issue. So I think generally the reason why Western media and Western politicians are trying to imply that China and Russia really don't have that sort of friendship and partnership is because they are afraid of that partnership. And they want people to have this sort of impression that these are not really friends. You know, they have so many hidden conflicts between them. And that is why I think we should absolutely disregard these Western reports.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We have to leave it there. Former Kremlin advisor Alexander Nekrasov and senior fellow with the China Institute of International Relations, Mr. Yang Xiyu. And you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after this. Stay with us. He was among the earliest Hong Kong businessmen to invest in the Chinese mainland in the 1980s. He has been nicknamed the Chinese Donald Trump after having successfully invested in the real estate sector. Vincent Lo, the chairman of Shui On Group, is now the chairman of Hong Kong's Trade Development Council, helping Hong Kong's small and medium-sized enterprises with their global business. How could Lo's organization help promote the local SMEs integration with the Chinese mainland and the rest of the world? How does he view the Belt and Road Initiative and the kind of role Hong Kong could play in this? And how is the political divisiveness in the region potentially jeopardizing its business development? I talked in Hong Kong with Vincent Lo ahead of the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong's return to China. Now, imagine, or let's recall, 20 years ago on the 1st of July, where were you, what you were doing?
I was basically hooked onto the television watching the handover ceremony.
When you were watching that ceremony, did you ever imagine that you would end up being the guy promoting the trade of Hong Kong with other countries?
I've never really dreamt of myself doing this job because trade is actually not my expertise or my interest in a way. But I guess because when I talked to the chief executive of Hong Kong and I talked to him about my views on the Belt and Road Initiative, and I guess he probably thought that I could do something in that regard, and so he appointed me to this position.
When was it that you started to pay attention to this Belt and Road Initiative, and what about it that caught your attention?
It was actually in 2013 when President Xi Jinping announced the concept to the world, and at that time actually I was thinking to myself, wow, 65 countries, 4.4 billion people, how are you able to work on something so huge? And I didn't really follow too much on it. But in the last few years, I started to see that President Xi, basically he was more like a traveling salesman for the concept, and the world is now basically all warmed up for this.
What made you believe that Hong Kong has a place in its?
I have to also confess, I was looking at this at first and say, okay, as a businessman, as a company, how do I get involved into the Belt and Road? And so the idea then started to sort of formulate in my head and said, if Hong Kong can be a commercial platform so that companies, smaller companies, can participate into the Belt and Road investment.
What do you mean by being a commercial platform?
I believe the resources that's required to undertake this whole plan is so tremendous that it's got to be a world project. The world's resources will all have to be channeled properly into these investments. And also, these investments will have to be commercially driven. It's got to be profit driven. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
What are the advantages of Hong Kong businesses in the whole project compared with the Chinese mainland counterparts, especially for small and medium-sized businesses?
Now, first of all, Hong Kong is an international finance center. We are very strong in professional services, the rule of law, and we have been so used to interacting, doing business with all different cultures and different areas in the world. And so Hong Kong is actually very well placed to be a market-driven platform for the Belt and Road.
But we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars of infrastructure investment. For SMEs, for instance, this might be just too big, too grand a project. How can they set their foot in?
Well, I totally agree with you. But the thing is, let me just give you a practical example. I've taken a delegation of both Hong Kong and Shanghai enterprises to visit with Thailand and Vietnam a month ago. And we focused on infrastructure. So infrastructure, you're looking at billions and if not trillions of investment. But the thing is, these projects, there will need to be elite investors, but you will also need consultants like engineering, architecture, planning, maybe finance advisors. So all these are smaller companies that then go along and work on the projects together. But infrastructure is only the starting point. When the infrastructure is connected, I believe then trade, tourism, investments, manufacturing, everything will follow.
What do you think will be the keys to the success of this initiative, of Hong Kong's involvement in this initiative?
Well, I think Hong Kong can help to build the platform so that that platform can be for everybody's use, for everybody's benefit. It's not just for Hong Kong, But I believe the Belt and Road will be a major plan, concept for the whole world. Because if you look at the Western economies now, I don't think you will see very major growth there. So the growth will have to come from the developing countries. And along the Belt and Road, the population is over 60% of the world, but the GDP is only 30%. So there's a lot of upside.
Is this also why you think Hong Kong needs to jump on this opportunity at this strategic moment, where after since 20 years of Hong Kong's return, we have seen several changes in cycle of Hong Kong's economic development?
Oh yes, this is a golden opportunity. I would even call it once in a lifetime, right? And what Hong Kong, I think, is also very advantageous in is that we have been investing into the Chinese mainland for the past 30 or 40 years. And that experience is so valuable in investing into all these Belt and Road countries.
Looking back also of the 20 years of Hong Kong's return to China, what caught you by surprise and what did you expect?
I have to confess, the political situation environment in Hong Kong is disappointing to me. When we were drafting the basic law, I have to confess, I was very much an active part of it. We really did not understand what democracy is. And of course, we all study overseas, so the Western style democracy sort of grew up with us. And so we thought, oh, good, one man, one vote, this and that. But we did not understand the price of democracy and the impact of elections.
Was Hong Kong not ready for this one man, one person, one vote, or it's not the right formula anyway?
Not that we're not ready, but it's just that you have to cultivate the environment, and you have to cultivate and groom the resources and also the politicians, right? If you don't really understand about public policy, how are you actually going to deliberate on it? And also, because the system in Hong Kong, I must confess at this stage, it's not really such a workable arrangement. But of course, we're still in the working process. But the thing is, the government, although we hope that we will have an executive-led government, but the problem is our administration, they do not have one vote in the legislature. So every
They're
time,
powerless.
Yes. So every time when you need to have some allocation of funds or resources, you have to go to the legislature, and the legislature will not cooperate. And so what do you do? Like a few years ago, the chief executive wanted to establish a new branch for innovation and technology, but for 3 years could not get through the legislature. So there was no money allocated for that important exercise.
Any way out in the near future out of this? What would have to be done, you think, in order for Hong Kong to really start to benefit from this system or arrangement?
I hope Hong Kong people, first of all, will have to really wake up to the realities and say, okay, politics is not going to try and solve all your problems, but at least I think we will need to try and work together as a community rather than completely divided. Right now, Hong Kong is so divisive and so politicized that nothing gets done. And I can tell you, our commissioner for Belt and Road, she's not receiving any pay from the government because the government would not be able to get money from the legislature.
Do you foresee this kind of political divisiveness affecting the economic prosperity and future of Hong Kong?
So far, it's not too evident, but the thing is, going forward, if our community remains to be so divisive and so difficult to get things done, then I'm sure some businesses will have to consider, should they be stationed elsewhere? That, I think, would really hurt Hong Kong. But then again, Hong Kong is not just this problem we have on our hand. A major one is the property prices. It's simply too high. And the young people will not be able to afford to have a decent flat in their whole life. So I think that's also pushing a lot of the young people to become more radical.
You seem a little bit pessimistic, quite worried.
I am worried, but the thing is, I'm also a born optimist. I believe we will work things out ourselves, and hopefully also with the support and help from the central government. But that is why I'm so keen to work on the Belt and Road, because I think that will really inject a new direction and breakthrough in our economy. Right? For the past 20 years or so, we've been so focused on just finance and properties. But that is not enough.
You need to...
And Hong Kong is such a mature and basically all saturated by the big companies. Small startups, I think they will find it very difficult to try and find a place.
Yeah, that's why you're trying to...
So we will need to find new avenues and openings for our young people.
We have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent Lo, Chairman of the Trade Development Council of Hong Kong. Well, a short last point. Basically, the day after I talked to Vincent Lo, Chinese President Xi Jinping gave a highly anticipated keynote speech on his take for Hong Kong's future. President Xi stressed the importance of upholding national unity and tolerance for major differences. And he highlighted development as the key to solving the problems in Hong Kong society. With the backing of the central government, Xi said there are vast opportunities to be grasped. An opportunity missed is an opportunity lost. Hopefully, President Xi's messages will resonate with SMEs in Hong Kong as they try to shrug off the negative impact of a divided and politicized society. That's all for this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, follow me on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN Live to watch our show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.